One day, while the prince was away, a royal messenger came to Zoba's shop with a stern warning from the king. By order of King Osa, you must stop seeing Prince Obina immediately. If you don't, there will be severe consequences, the messenger said. In the busy town of Omudi, peace, unity, and the sound of laughter filled the air. The town was always lively. An orphan girl named Chizobam lived there, but everyone called her Zoba. Her name had a special meaning. Zoba's father had died when she was just 7 months in her mother's womb. The sad news made her mother got into labor. The pain was too much, and a few minutes after Zoba was born, her mother also passed away. Her mother's brother, Uncle Mezie, and his wife took her in. They named her Chizobam, which means God had saved me, because they believed God had helped her. Since then, Uncle Mezie and his wife raised Zoba as their daughter because they had no children of their own. Uncle Mezie was not rich. He and his wife struggled to make ends meet. So Zoba did not get the kind of good life she deserved. At a young age, Zoba started helping her uncle by selling fresh fruits in the village square. Zoba's shop was small but always had the freshest fruits. She sold plantains, bananas, oranges, and other delicious fruits. Her warm smile could light up the entire market, and she was loved by everyone who knew her. Despite her simple life, Zoba carried herself with grace and kindness, earning the respect of all around her. The town of Umudi was governed by a wise and kind king named King Osa. King Osa had a son named Obina. Prince Obina was rude and arrogant. He looked down on people because of his royal status. One fateful day, Prince Obina decided to take an evening stroll through the market. Prince Obina was known for his arrogance and disdain towards commoners. He believed that his royal blood made him superior to everyone else. With his expensive clothes and lavish spending, he often flaunted his wealth, making sure everyone knew he was a prince. As Prince Obina walked through the market, his eyes were drawn to Zoba's shop. He was immediately captivated by her beauty and her contagious smile. Curious, he decided to stop and purchase some fruits. However, when he approached her stall, he was irritated by the humble surroundings and treated Zoba with contempt. "How much for these plantains?" Prince Obina asked, his tone cold and dismissive. "They are 500 naira each, your highness," Zoba replied politely, bowing slightly. Without a word, Prince Obina threw the money at her feet. "There, keep the change," he said arrogantly. Though hurt by the prince's behavior, Zoba maintained her dignity. She bent down, picked up the money, and looked up at him with a kind smile. "Thank you, your highness," she said softly. The encounter sparked a series of events that would change their lives forever. Prince Obina continued to belittle Zoba whenever he visited the market. But Zoba, seeing beyond his arrogance, recognized the deep-seated insecurity driving his behavior. She made it a point to always treat him with kindness, despite his cruelty. Meanwhile, Prince Obina found himself drawn to Zoba's warmth and humility. He began to secretly visit her shop more frequently, engaging her in conversations that challenged his beliefs and broadened his perspectives. One evening, as the sun began to set, Prince Obina found himself once again at Zoba's stall. "Why do you always smile, even when people are unkind to you?" he asked genuinely. Zoba looked at him with her gentle eyes. "I believe that everyone deserves kindness, your highness. A smile can change someone's day, even if they don't show it. Prince Obina was silent for a moment, pondering her words. He had never met anyone like Zoba before, someone who could see the good in everyone, even him. As their paths continued to cross, the contrast between their lives became increasingly apparent. Prince Obina's lavish lifestyles was built on the backs of the poor, like Zoba, who toiled tirelessly to survive. He began to see the unfairness of it all and felt a growing sense of shame for his previous behavior. One day, Prince Obina's father, King Osa, learned about his son's frequent visits to the market and his growing friendship with a commoner. Concerned about his son's association with someone of such low status, the king ordered Prince Obina to end the relationship. "You are a prince, Obina," King Osa said on a serious tone. "You have no business fraternizing with commoners. End this relationship at once." For the first time in his life, Prince Obina defied his father's wishes. "Father, I cannot. Zoba is different. She has taught me more about kindness and humility than anyone else. True wealth lies in the connections we make with others, not in our royal status." King Osa was furious but could see the determination in his son's eyes. He realized that this was a battle he could not win easily. After Prince Obina stood up to his father, King Osa, by continuing to see Zoba, he felt torn between his royal duties and his desire to help the common people. One day, while the prince was away, a royal messenger came to Zoba's shop with a stern warning from the king. "By order of King Osa, you must stop seeing Prince Obina immediately. If you don't, there will be severe consequences," the messenger said. Zoba felt sad, but she didn't show her fear. She knew her friendship with the prince was important and could bring change. She decided to listen to the king's warning but felt heavy-hearted. Later that day, Prince Obina came to the market and noticed something was wrong with Zoba. "Is everything okay? Is something wrong?" he asked. "Your Highness, I have been told to end our friendship," Zoba replied softly. "The king says we cannot see each other anymore." Prince Obina was angry. "I will not let my father control my life. You have opened my eyes, Zoba, and I can't go back to the way things were." Zoba understood the prince's struggle. "Your Highness, sometimes the right path is not the easiest. Maybe there is another way for you to make a difference." The prince left the market that evening, feeling determined to find a way to balance his love for Zoba and his royal duties. As the days went by, people noticed a change in Prince Obina. He was no longer the arrogant prince they knew. He was kind and caring, thanks to Zoba's influence. Meanwhile, Zoba kept running her fruit stall, never losing hope. She believed the prince could make a difference. Back in the palace, King Osa was frustrated with his son's behavior. He gathered his council of elders to discuss the situation. "My son is associating with a girl of low status," he said. "We must stop this." The elders suggested many ideas, but none pleased the king. Finally, one elder spoke up. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should arrange a marriage for Prince Obina. A union with a noble family might make him focus on his royal duties." King Osa liked the idea. He decided to arrange a meeting with the family of Lady Adobe, a noble woman known for her beauty and intelligence. Prince Obina, unaware of his father's plans, continued to visit Zoba in secret. They talked about how to help the people and improve the kingdom. One evening, as they sat under a large mango tree, Prince Obina shared his worries with Zoba. "My father wants to keep us apart, but I can't give up. I want to make a real difference and I need your help." Zoba smiled warmly. Your Highness, true change starts from within. You have already taken the first step by opening your heart. Keep listening, learning, and acting with kindness. The people will follow a leader who truly cares for them. Prince Obina felt hopeful after their conversation. He knew it would be a tough journey, but with Zoba's wisdom and his determinations, he believed they could overcome any obstacle. When Prince Obina returned to the palace, his father called him into his chamber to inform him of a decision. Obina, you will marry Lady Margaret's daughter, a prestigious lady from the neighboring kingdom, King Osa announced. Father, please, I am not a child that you can force a wife upon. I love Zoba, and she is the one I have chosen. That is final, Prince Obina replied firmly. Prince Obina's refusal to obey his father's command started a series of events that would change the kingdom forever. Determined to teach his son a lesson, King Osa took away his royal privileges and sent him to live on the outskirts of the kingdom. Without his wealth and status, Prince Obina faced the tough reality of life as a commoner. He struggled to find simple jobs and was often laughed at by the same people he used to look down on. In these hard times, Zoba fruit stall became a place of hope for the struggling prince. She offered him kind words and good advice, helping him understand the importance of hard work and humility. Don't give up, Your Highness, Zoba would always say. Every challenge is a chance to grow. As the prince worked to rebuild his life, he began to see how wrong he had been. He realized that his pride and sense of superiority had blinded him to the struggles of others. Zoba's kindness and generosity inspired him to make things right and start afresh. Life in Umudi went on as usual, but the absence of Prince Obina from the palace was deeply felt by many. King Osa, sitting on the grand throne, often thought about his son. He began to regret his harsh decision to send the prince away. One day, as King Osa was deep in thought, one of his most trusted advisors approached him. Your Majesty, you seem troubled. Is something bothering you? He asked. The king sighed. I miss my son. I am starting to see that sending him away might have been a mistake. What King Osa didn't know was that some of the elders had secretly advised him to disinherit Prince Obina for their selfish interests. They hoped to gain more power and control in the kingdom if the prince was out of the picture. One night, King Osa had a dream where he saw the kingdom falling apart because of his decision to send Prince Obina away. He woke up in a sweat and realized he had to make things right. The next morning, King Osa called a meeting with all his elders and advisors. We must find a way to bring Prince Obina back to the palace, he declared. But Your Majesty, he defied your orders, one elder protested. That may be true, but he is my only son and the future of our kingdom, King Osa replied firmly. The elders who had selfish motives tried to dissuade the king. Your Majesty, Prince Obina has shown disrespect. It might be wise to let him learn his lesson longer, they suggested. King Osa paused, realizing that he had been listening to the wrong advice. He could see now that these elders had their own plans. No, I see now that it was unwise to disinherit my son. I will find a way to bring him back and make amends. King Osa began to plan how to bring Prince Obina back to the palace. He also needed to figure out how to persuade his son to marry Adobe. He thought about sending a trusted messenger to speak with the prince. The king's heart ached with the knowledge that he had driven his son away. He wanted nothing more than to see Prince Obina return and take his rightful place by his side. Meanwhile, Prince Obina continued to live as a commoner, learning valuable lessons about humility and kindness from Zoba. He worked hard every day, and though life was tough, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. One evening, as Zoba and Prince Obina sat together by her fruit stall, the prince shared his thoughts. Zoba, my life has changed so much since I left the palace. I see now how wrong I was to look down on others. Your kindness has taught me so much. Your Highness, you have grown so much. I believe that one day you will be a great king who will truly care for his people. Zoba said, smiling. Back at the palace, King Osa sent for his most trusted loyal messenger. Go and find my son. Tell him that I wish to speak with him and that I want him to come back to the palace. The king instructed. The messenger nodded and set off on his journey to find Prince Obina. He hoped that the prince would listen and return to the palace, where his father awaited with a plan to make things right. Prince Obina was working hard at a small job he had found when a messenger from the palace approached him. The messenger bowed and said, Your Highness, the king wishes to speak with you. He asks you to return to the palace. At first, Prince Obina refused. I don't want to go back, he said. I've found a new life here. But Zoba urged him to answer his father. You should go, Your Highness. Your father is reaching out. It's important. Reluctantly, Prince Obina agreed. He traveled back to the palace, not knowing what to expect. When he arrived, King Osa was waiting for him. The king looked tired and regretful. Obina, my son, King Osa began, I am sorry for sending you away. I see now that it was a mistake. Please come back to the palace. After much argument, Prince Obina finally accepted his father's apology and agreed to return to the palace. However, he was unaware that plans were being made to make him marry Adobe. When Prince Obina was leaving Zoba to go back to the palace, Zoba felt very emotional. She had gotten used to his presence and would miss him. I will always visit you, Prince Obina promised her. 2 days after the prince had returned to the palace, King Osa secretly sent his trusted messenger to Uncle Mezie's house. They carried a stern warning. Tell your niece to stop seeing the prince, they demanded, or else your house will be burnt down and you will be banished from this village. Mr. Mezie pleaded with the messengers. Please, I will talk to my niece, he promised. When Zoba returned from her day's business, her uncle called her outside. Zoba, you are all we have, and we are all you have, he said gently. The prince and you are not on the same level. Zoba was confused. What do you mean, uncle? Uncle Mezie explained about the royal visit and their warning. The king has ordered that you must stop seeing the prince. Zoba felt a sharp pain in her heart. She apologized to her uncle for the trouble and promised to do as they said. When she went inside, she cried her eyes out. She regretted ever knowing the prince and wished she hadn't brought this trouble to her poor family. She cried until she fell asleep. The next day, Prince Obina decided to visit Zoba. He was surprised when he arrived at the market and found her shop closed. Zoba never left her business unattended. Worried, he went to her uncle's house to find out what was wrong. When Prince Obina arrived, Uncle Mezie saw him and quickly sent Zoba inside. The prince asked, Where is Zoba? I didn't see her at the market. Uncle Mezie replied, Zoba has gone to be with one of my sisters. We want her to learn a trade there. Hearing this, Prince Obina felt a sharp pain in his heart. Without saying another word, he turned and left. He returned to the palace and silently entered his room. He felt betrayed that Zoba couldn't come and say goodbye or inform him of the new development. That night, Prince Obinna went to bed without eating, feeling sad and confused. Meanwhile, at Uncle Mezier's house, Zoba was also sad. From her hiding place, she had seen the pain on Prince Obinna's face. Her uncle's wife tried to reassure her, saying, "This is for your own good, Zoba." Zoba nodded, but deep down, she wasn't happy. She missed the prince and felt guilty for not being able to say goodbye. The next day, Prince Obinna returned to Uncle Mezier's house. He pleaded with him, "Please give me the address of Zoba's auntie's house so I can go and look for her." Uncle Mezier shook his head. "Zoba gave strict instructions that you shouldn't look for her. She wants to concentrate on learning her new skill." Hearing this, Prince Obinna felt even worse. He turned and left, his mind filled with questions. Does Zoba now say that I am a distraction to her? What did I do to make her hate me like this? These thoughts haunted him for weeks. Zoba was not happy that her uncle told the prince she didn't want to see him. She went to the back of their house and cried secretly. She felt torn between her love for the prince and the duty of her family. King Osa noticed how sad and distracted Prince Obinna had become since Zoba left. He decided to take advantage of his son's vulnerable state. The king devised a plan to make Prince Obinna forget about Zoba and instead focus on Adobe. The king spoke to the royal cook and instructed him to add a special substance to the prince's meal, something that would make him fall into a deep sleep. Later, the king sent for Prince Obinna and persuaded him to eat something, pretending to be concerned. "Son, you've been upset for weeks now. Zoba wouldn't want you to suffer like this," the king said kindly. Prince Obinna shook his head. "Father, Zoba deserves more than my love. She deserves my love and respect. She deserves even more than this." King Osa nodded, pretending to understand. "I know, my son, but you need to eat to keep your strength up." After much persuasion, Prince Obinna agreed to eat. As soon as he finished the meal, he began to feel drowsy and soon fell asleep. Seizing the opportunity, the king sent for Adobe. "Come to the palace and lay beside the prince," he instructed her. Adobe did as she was told. She lay next to the sleeping prince, making sure she was not properly covered. When Prince Obinna finally woke up, he was shocked to see Adobe beside him. "What are you doing here?" he asked, quickly getting up and covering himself. Adobe sat up and smiled sweetly. "You sent for me, your highness. You've been with me all day." Prince Obinna was confused. "I don't remember any of that." As they were arguing, King Osa walked into the room. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Adobe pretended to be upset. "Your highness, you sent for me. Now you act as if you don't remember." Prince Obinna was even more confused. "Father, I don't remember any of this." King Osa nodded and said, "It's true, son. You asked for Adobe." Feeling betrayed and confused, Prince Obinna watched as Adobe pretended to be angry and walked out of the room. He stood there not knowing what to think or do. As Adobe walked away, King Osa and she felt proud that their plan had worked. They were ready to move to the next phase. Prince Obinna refused to come out of his room, ashamed and pained by what had happened. He felt he had betrayed Zoba, especially after assuring her that she would be the only one his heart beat for. Later that day, King Osa visited his son's room to cheer him up. "Son, nothing is spoiled. It was just an honest mistake," he said kindly. Prince Obinna appreciated his father's words, not knowing that his father was behind everything. "Thank you, father," he replied quietly. Meanwhile, the elders who had been pushing the king to disinherit his son were angry. They had plans to take the throne away from Prince Obinna. The man they wanted to make the next king had given them a huge amount of money, and now he was pressuring them to fulfill their promise. One evening, the man came to the palace and exposed the elders to King Osa. Your Majesty, these elders have betrayed you. They took money from me to make me the next king, he said. King Osa was both surprised and disappointed. These were his most trusted elders. In his wrath, he took away their titles and banished them from the palace. He also gave them a deadline to repay the money they had taken. The king returned to his chambers, his mind filled with betrayal and disappointment. He realized that in his quest to control his son's future, he had allowed himself to be manipulated by those he trusted. After some time, Prince Obinna resumed his duties, as his father King Osa had been grieving the betrayal from his trusted elders. A month after the encounter with Adobe, she returned to the palace with shocking news. Your Majesty, Your Highness, Adobe said, her voice trembling with false excitement, I am pregnant with the prince's child. Prince Obinna was stunned. His feet felt glued to the ground, and he lost his speech for a moment. King Osa pretended to be surprised as well. Seeing his son's confused face, King Osa spoke up. Adobe, we will handle this matter with care. Please give us some time. With that, Adobe left. Prince Obinna returned to his room in tears, knowing that the only solution was to marry Adobe, which went against his deepest wish. As Obinna sat in his room, his father smiled to himself, knowing Adobe wasn't really pregnant. He was sure Obinna would have no choice but to accept Adobe as his wife. A week later, Prince Obinna went to see his father one evening to discuss the way forward with Adobe. The king, pretending to be wise and caring, said, Son, you need to do the right thing. Prince Obinna sighed deeply. Father, I will marry Adobe. King Osa acted pleased. You have made a wise decision, my son. Adobe's family was contacted and a marriage proposal was made. Preparations for a big day began immediately. Finally, the day of the wedding arrived. Prince Obinna and Adobe were married in a grand ceremony. Though the prince's heart was heavy, he couldn't help but think of Zoba, the girl who had truly captured his heart. The news of the prince's marriage to Adobe spread throughout the village, and eventually it reached Zoba. She was heartbroken, feeling betrayed by the prince. She cried for weeks, mourning the loss of the man she had come to care for deeply. One day, as Zoba was crying, her uncle's wife came to comfort her. Zoba, the prince has finally realized that you are not of his class. He has decided to marry a girl who matches his status. Zoba felt a sharp pain in her heart, but she tried to accept the harsh reality. After a month, she managed to find some relief and trained herself to forget about the prince. She decided to return to her fruit business, which her aunt had been running in her absence. When Zoba returned to her stall, her customers welcomed her warmly. They had missed her cheerful face. Within a week, she was able to make profits that her auntie couldn't achieve in a month. Life continued for Prince Obinna and his new wife, Adobe. However, Adobe was unhappy. She complained that the prince never spent time with her and that she always felt lonely. The prince had never been intimate with her, which worried Adobe because she needed to maintain her lie about being pregnant. One day, Prince Obinna was passing through the village square on his way to a neighboring village where he saw Zoba. He looked closely to confirm it was really her. When he was sure, he called out her name, Zoba. Seeing the prince, Zoba's heart skipped a beat, but she stood her ground and turned her face away. The prince was surprised by Zoba's reaction. Unsure of how she would respond if he approached her, he decided to keep his distance. Prince Obinna continued his journey to the neighboring village, but he wasn't himself. He couldn't stop thinking about Zoba and why she had acted so coldly towards him. He hurriedly completed his business and, on his way back, looked out for Zoba at the town square, but she wasn't there. When he got home, he was very gloomy. He went straight to his room and didn't respond to anyone, despite Adobe's efforts to cheer him up. She was worried and frustrated. She went to see the king to voice her concerns. Your Majesty, the prince hasn't been intimate with me. How am I supposed to get pregnant and cover up the lie I told? She pleaded. The king sighed and said, Be patient, Adobe. The prince will come around. Frustrated and confused, Adobe left the king's presence. She was scared that her lie would soon catch up with her. She silently prayed to the gods to help her. Meanwhile, Zoba was also worried. The sight of the prince had brought back many memories. Her uncle noticed her mood and asked, Zoba, why are you so moody? Nothing much, uncle. I'm just lost in thought, she replied, hiding her true feelings. She went to her room and cried herself to sleep. The next day, Prince Obinna was determined to face Zoba. He resolved to ask her all questions on his mind. He didn't care how she might react. He needed answers. With determination, he got up, took a bath, and anxiously waited for the right time to go to Zoba's shop. His wife Adobe approached him to inquire about his night and asked what he would like for breakfast. As usual, she was met with a cold shoulder. Angered, Adobe stormed out of the palace, murmuring to herself. Prince Obinna cared little about Adobe's anger. He wasn't concerned with her feelings or anything related to her. All that mattered to him now was Zoba. When he was sure that Zoba would be at her shop, he set off immediately. When he arrived at the shop, he saw Zoba with her head bent, lost in thought. He cleared his throat to bring her back to reality. Zoba was shocked to see him but quickly composed herself. What are you doing here? She asked. Prince Obinna couldn't say anything at first. He just went closer and gave her a tight hug. Zoba couldn't resist, but she eventually struggled free, pretending she didn't like it. Why did you leave me without thinking of how I would feel? He asked, his voice filled with pain. Why did you tell your uncle that I was a distraction and that I shouldn't look for you? Have I ever been a distraction to you? Zoba let out a tear, seeing the sincerity in the prince's voice. She explained everything, how his father had given strict warnings to her guardians, and how her uncle had no choice but to hide her to keep them safe. Prince Obinna was furious. He couldn't believe his father had done that. Zoba then reminded him that he was now married and that he hadn't thought or fought for their love. She confessed how saddened she was when she learned about his marriage. I never loved Adobe, the prince assured her. Marrying her was my greatest mistake. They both cried on each other's shoulders, sharing their pain and regrets. Later in the evening, Prince Obinna went home, determined to confront his father. When Prince Obinna got home, he stormed into his father's chambers, his face flushed with anger. Father, why are you bent on destroying my happiness? He demanded. Why did you force Zoba away and make me marry someone I don't love? King Osa was taken aback. He had no explanation to give and was surprised that his son had found out. He had given strict warnings that on no account should Obinna know what had happened. Behind the door, Adobe heard all the arguments between the prince and the king. She became even more scared, realizing the depth of the prince's feelings for Zoba. Obinna, unable to bear his father's silence, walked out in frustration. From that day, Prince Obinna visited Zoba daily. He was scarcely at home. Adobe, growing more suspicious, decided to follow him. She discovered that he was seeing Zoba and finally gave up. She went to the king and told him everything. Your Majesty, Obinna is still seeing Zoba, she confessed. The king was shocked and confused. He didn't want to do anything that would shatter his son again. One day, after the prince returned from seeing Zoba, Adobe packed her belongings and announced that she was leaving. She confessed to the prince that she had never been pregnant and narrated everything about the plan she and his father had concocted. King Osa hung his head in shame. Obinna couldn't believe his ears. He just walked away to the palace garden to clear his head. The king was disappointed with Adobe, but Adobe didn't care. Her peace of mind and freedom were all that mattered to her now. Prince Obinna sat in the palace garden, his mind in turmoil. The truth about Adobe's false pregnancy and his father's manipulation weighed heavily on him. He felt betrayed by the very people who were supposed to care for him the most. King Osa, realizing the depth of his mistakes, knew he had to make things right. He sought out his son in the garden. Obinna, the king began softly, I have made many mistakes. I see now how much pain I have caused you. Please forgive me, my son. Prince Obinna looked at his father, the hurt still evident in his eyes. Father, why did you do this? Why did you try to control my life and take away my happiness? King Osa sighed deeply. I thought I was doing what was best for you and the kingdom. I wanted you to marry someone from a noble family, someone who could help you rule. But I see now that I was wrong. I let pride and tradition blind me to what truly matters, your happiness. Obinna remained silent, listening to his father's heartfelt apology. The king continued, I want to make amends. If Zoba is the one who makes you happy, then you have my blessings to marry her. I will support you both. Prince Obinna's heart lifted at his father's words. Thank you, father. That means everything to me. The next day, Prince Obinna went to see Zoba. He found her at her fruit stall, her face lighting up when she saw him. Zoba, he said, taking her hands in his, my father has given us his blessings. We can finally be together. Tears of joy filled Zoba's eyes. Oh, Obinna, I never thought this day would come. Plans for the wedding began immediately. The whole kingdom buzzed with excitement over the news of the prince marrying the kind and humble Zoba. Despite the previous obstacles, the love between Prince Obinna and Zoba triumphed. On the day of the wedding, the palace was decorated with flowers and filled with the joyous sounds of music and laughter. The town people gathered to witness the union of their beloved prince and the girl who had captured his heart. Zoba, dressed in a beautiful gown, walked down the aisle with a radiant smile. Prince Obinna stood at the altar, his eyes filled with love and happiness. King Osa watched with a proud smile, knowing he has finally done the right thing. As they exchanged their vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. The love between Obinna and Zoba was palpable, a true testament to the power of genuine affection and perseverance. After the ceremony, the celebration continued late in the night. The kingdom rejoiced in the union of their prince and the girl who had shown them the true meaning of love and humility. Prince Obinna and Zoba lived happily ever after, ruling the kingdom with kindness and compassion. Their love story became a legend, inspiring future generations to follow their hearts and never give up on true love. And so, against all odds, Prince Obinna and Zoba found their happily ever after, proving that love, honesty, and forgiveness can overcome even the greatest challenge. The most important lesson in this story is that true love and happiness come from being honest and following your heart, not from trying to meet others' expectations or being controlled by pride and traditions. Forgiveness and understanding can heal mistakes, and it's always better to support and trust those you love. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonders, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.